Number 10. Modeling with sharks. Sharks are beautiful and terrifying creatures. We know this. Molly Cavalli learned that the hard way. Molly had some modeling under her belt and wanted to expand her portfolio by doing an epic underwater photo shoot with sharks. Sounds cool, okay? The intention was to have Molly quickly dive into the shark cage with a camera and begin broadcasting as lemon sharks circled nearby. The model bravely jumped into the shark cage, wearing just a swimsuit, of course, because she's modeling. But within seconds, the blonde was left in agony as a shark broke through the bars of the cage. It thrashed around and took a bite of her ankle. A terrified Molly screamed in agony and terror as she was quickly brought to the surface and pulled back onto the boat. She revealed her blood-soaked leg, and the water surrounding the boat was red with her blood. Molly ended up needing 20 stitches, but she was okay. The photo shoot had not gone according to plan, but that is quite the story to tell. Number 9. The Cave Dive Rescue. Going now to a more recreational form of diving, underwater cave diving is the act of using scuba tanks to dive deep and explore the underwater caves that have been formed naturally over the years. This is one of the reasons why people are so interested in exploring the ocean, because places like this exist. Have you ever been cave diving? The Plerdalen Valley in central Norway has a pond known as Plura, and if you were to swim underground for half a kilometer, you will emerge into a long, colorful cave. Diving hobbyists can climb out of the water here to admire the grotto before returning to Plura. But if you were highly trained and a very curious individual, you might continue on a course that quickly plunges even deeper, becoming more and more narrow and difficult through ice-cold, pitch-black water. That's more than enough incentive for some brave cave divers to try and check it out. But the problem with these dives is that there's a very high percentage of error. And in 2014, a pair of divers went into this cave system and never resurfaced. Because of how deep into the cave system they were when they died, it was deemed impossible for other divers to get their bodies back. But some friends of those divers decided to try and get them anyway. Needless to say, this was a perilous event, and the divers knew it, especially as they dived deeper and deeper into the cave. The deeper part is very demanding, very cold water and narrow tunnels, and deep as well. It is the world's deepest sump that has ever been dived through, noted one of the divers. It was later revealed by those rescue divers that the 2 men who died had their lives taken by accident during their original expedition, including one getting caught between some rocks and tangled up in a cord. The rescue dive was supposed to take 5 hours, but it took 11 hours, and when the divers returned, all 3 of them had to be taken to the hospital for decompression sickness. Afterward, the Plura Cave was sealed so that no one else suffered the same fate. But the mission was successful as they got their friends' bodies out. Number 8. The Mythbusters versus the Great White Shark. Anyone who was a fan of the show Mythbusters knows that they loved testing their shark myths. They did several myths about Jaws, the Steven Spielberg film, and what the shark logically could have done. They also did a plethora of myths about real-life sharks and how to defend yourselves against them, as well as ensure that you don't attract them. For the Mythbusters supersized special, they wanted to bust a myth about certain sounds being an excellent attractor to sharks as a whole, as they could sense some frequencies that would allow them to sense prey that was hurt or weak so that they could have an easy meal. To do this, though, they needed to put one of the hosts in a shark cage so that they could see how the sharks react to the sounds. In the initial test for this, host Jamie Hyneman was the man in the cage, and not too long after being put into the water, a great white shark came around and rammed the shark cage so hard that it actually burst through the top of the cage. While it's true that Jamie wasn't injured, you can very well hear him reacting quite frantically as he's trying to explain how much danger he's in. As the fans of the series know, James Franklin Hyneman doesn't scare easily, but having a shark full-on come into the cage that is supposed to keep them out, yeah, that'll make you rethink some things. Have you ever swam with sharks? Do you want to after hearing this story? Let me know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. Number 7. Darkness and Death. For another example of an underwater cave diving expedition gone wrong, we head to South Africa, where Don Shirley and Dave Shaw went diving almost 1,000 feet underwater in Bushman's Cave, seeking to recover the remains of Dion Dreyer. Dreyer was a man who had died at that depth, and his body had never been recovered. So these two going to get it back after all that time was risky, to say the least. They did find the body, but when they did, a series of unfortunate mishaps led to one death and a long trip back to the surface. Shaw had lost his light while trying to hoist Dreyer's body to the surface. Then he got tangled up in the line that was connected to Dreyer's body. As for Shirley, he was having equipment malfunctions, including one that led to him getting too much oxygen. Despite what you may think, getting too much oxygen can be poisonous to one's body, and he was losing consciousness, vomiting in his suit, which is not good either, and getting heavily disoriented. Eventually, he was able to figure out where he was in total darkness, and then for the next 10 hours, he slowly made his way to the surface in order to not get the bends, which you can get if you rise too quickly. As for Shaw, he died in the waters. After a while, both his and Dreyer's bodies made their way to the surface, both tangled up in the line that connected them. Number 6, Jacob's Well. When it comes to humanity and its desire for a challenge, we do just about anything. And when it comes to divers, that means going and finding dive spots that have caves that require precision in order to dive through safely. The more dangerous it is, the more we want to do it. That brings us to Jacob's Well in Texas. This is an infamous diving spot because it's so vast in terms of the cave system it wields that someone can very easily get turned around and get lost. Not to mention, it has a lot of false paths and exits that can make you follow them to your literal death. This is what happened to a student named Richard Patton. He was moving through the cave tunnels when he found what is known as a false chimney. Maybe he thought it was the way out? We don't know. He decided to follow it and he got trapped, which led to his death. As if that wasn't enough, Jacob's Well is known for having silt that can be so thick underwater that it blinds the divers, further ensuring that they lose their way and never make it back to the surface. You'd think that this would stop people from diving here, but you'd be wrong. In fact, a local dive shop owner dived into the spot to seal it up with a gate to prevent people from risking their lives. When he went to check on the gate later, it was destroyed, with a note saying, "You can't keep us out." Number 5, vanished. A classic reason for deep-sea diving is exploring the waters in search of lost treasures, especially sunken ships. These ships are pieces of history, and depending on the one you find, you can actually locate hidden pirate treasures, including gold, jewels, pottery, ancient technology, and more. Tom Pritchard was a very experienced diver. I'm not just saying that. He had over 1,000 official dives during his career, and so he knew what he was doing. He was working with others on the famed vessel Andrea Doria and was attaching a mooring line when suddenly and randomly he vanished. When the other divers surfaced, they immediately noticed Pritchard was not with them. The Coast Guard did a sweep of the area, but they couldn't find him either. The Andrea Doria wreckage has always been dangerous and has claimed more than 15 lives due to its unstable nature. As such, there are all sorts of reasons why Pritchard could have vanished. Something could have happened to his oxygen supply, and the waters caused him to drift away. The boat could have collapsed around him and buried him in a way that no one could find him. Or, like other shipwrecks before it, the Andrea Doria could have gotten some underwater life in it and didn't appreciate Pritchard and the work he was doing. Either way, he was never found, and the mystery of his disappearance continues. What do you think happened to him? Let me know in the comments below. Number 4, separation. While it's true that most people go diving on their own, it's recommended that you go and dive in groups, or the very least in pairs. Experience is key, and when something goes wrong underwater, you want someone that knows what they're doing to watch your back. That would have been helpful in one group's case in Bali, as 7 people were separated from a boat they had come in on to dive and couldn't get back to it due to bad weather conditions. The result was them drifting out in open water for 28 hours. That kind of time in the water is extremely dangerous for all kinds of reasons, not the least of which is sun exposure, dehydration, lack of food, hungry sea creatures, the list goes on. Most of the party was able to reach the rocky islet where they were eventually rescued 2 days later, but not without casualties. During that whole scary ordeal, one of the women died, with her body being found 18 miles from the islet, while one of the instructors was lost at sea. Equally as tragic was that this voyage should not have happened at all. Why? Well, because the company the instructors were from had an expired permit. Number 3, lessons and lessons. Typically, when you think of diving mishaps, you think about when an experienced diver or an overeager diver goes to do something that they know they shouldn't, but overexert themselves and get into trouble. But rarely would you think of something incredibly bad happening during a diving lesson. But that's what happened for one man and his girlfriend. The man was getting his girlfriend some diving lessons so that they could go and enjoy diving together, and her instructors were being downright abusive towards her. They weren't teaching her properly, and they were ignoring key signs that she was in trouble. For example, her regulator was filled with sand and caused her to have breathing issues. When she went for her backup, the instructor refused to let her use it. She started to choke, and her boyfriend tried to help her, but the instructors refused to let him. And when one of the instructors tried to shove the regulator back into her mouth, they actually hit her in the head, and this caused her to breathe in some of the water. The boyfriend got her to the surface, but the instructors started to yell at both of them, despite the fact that she was literally begging for them to help save her life. Eventually, the boyfriend got her to the hospital, and she almost died from the experience. Though she lived, she now has memory issues, depression, and has a severe fear of the water. Not hard to imagine what caused all of those things. Safe to say, the couple won't be enjoying diving anytime soon. Number 2, speedboat disaster. 2 men went diving in Thailand one time and had a perfect diving experience. They had no issues underwater, no equipment malfunctions, and they stayed within the diving zone permitted for them to be in. So, what went wrong? Well, a speedboat driver didn't pay attention to where they were in the waters, and they drove through the diving zone just as the men were surfacing. The boat's propeller cut one of the men in half and hurt the other one so badly that they sank to the depths and died. Not the ending you expected, right? Number 1, the gift of diving. One of the most important elements of diving is using direction to go and judge how probable it is that a dive could hurt you or someone in your group. Sadly, for one father and son duo, that discretion was not used. A man and his son had gotten a lovely Christmas gift, scuba gear. So to test it out, they went to Eagle's Nest Sink underwater caves in Weeki Wachee, Florida. 2 problems. 1, the son wasn't a certified diver, and thus him doing any dangerous diving was already a huge risk. 2, the cave they were going to was extremely dangerous and had taken lives before. Oh, and the 2 had never gone cave diving before. So what could go wrong? Sure enough, their bodies were found later that evening. Proof that you need to be smart with your dives, else it'll cost lives. Thanks for watching. What do you think of these diving disasters? Have you ever had a diving disaster of your own? Do you now have a fear of ever attempting one of these dives? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like these. See you next time. Bye.